Hello, this is Leonie, and today I'm going to read Chapter 16 of The Witch of the Blackbird Pond. There will be no Thanksgiving this week, announced Matthew when he came home at noontime the next day. It seems we have no authority here in Connecticut to declare our own holidays. His Excellency, the new governor, will declare Thanksgiving when it pleases him. Oh dear, exclaimed Judith in disappointment. We had planned such a lovely day, and Mercy has pies baked already. We can be thankful among ourselves that we have an abundance to eat and the good health to enjoy it. But there won't be any games, and the train band won't drill? There's no occasion to celebrate, he reminded her. Better for the young people to remember that idleness breeds mischief. A disgraceful thing happened last night. Never since we have lived in Wethersfield has there been such a disturbance on All Hallows Eve. I thought I heard someone I thought I heard some shouting, said Rachel. It reminded me of home. In England the boys used to light bonfires and march through the streets. Such things are best not mentioned, her husband silenced her. All Saints' Day is a Papist feast, but our own young people have no share in this, thank goodness. 'Twas a rowdy band of rivermen from the trading ship. Did they do any damage? Little enough. Since we have a constable who is quick to his duty, the three ringleaders are cooling their heels now in the shed. And on lecture day they will sit for all to see in the town stocks. What did they do, father? Inquired Judith coolly. Across the table her eyes met Kit's deliberately. They came roistering into town just before midnight. I'm so sorry to tell you, Catherine, that your friend William Ashby seems to have been the only one singled out for the insulting prank. Kit dared not to ask the question, but her uncle went on. They illuminated his house, he told them gravely. You mean they burnt it down? Gasped Rachel. No, they well might have. They put lanterns in the window frames that are waiting for the new pans. Lanterns made out of pumpkin heads with candles inside and unholy faces cut into the side to show the lights. Jack-o'-lanterns! Exclaimed Judith. Kit choked suddenly on a giggle that rose unexpectedly from nowhere. Instantly she was horrified at herself, and in mortified confusion kept her eyes on the wooden trench before her. Her uncle shot a suspicious glare at the two girls. Whatever they are called, they're the devil's invention. 'Twas an outrageous piece of blasphemy. I trust that they will be dealt with severely. Thursday lecture day, the day of public punishment, was 2 days away. Somehow, Kit knew she would have to endure this waiting, though actually she knew already that she could not. It did no good to remind herself that there were dozens of trading ships on the river, and that the Dolphin might well be out to sea by now. Kit had no doubt at all that one at least of the culprits in the stocks would be, and neither by the smug of her pretty lips had Judith. By Thursday noon, Kit gave up trying to keep her mind on her work. No matter how she shrank from the ordeal before her, she knew she could not stay away. The one thing she could not face was the thought of taking the walk to the meeting house in the presence of Judith. An hour before meeting time, when all the family seemed occupied, she slipped out of the house and set along High Street with a hard little lump of dread crowding her ribs. At first she could barely glimpse the stocks. They were surrounded by the usual crowd of idlers and passer-by. It was no place for a girl alone, but she came to see it, clenching her fists tight to the move as she moved closer. Yes, they were all three Dolphin men, and none of them showed the slightest sign of repentance. One of the three sat with his head down in sullen disgust. Nat and the redhead seaman who had painted the Dolphin's figurehead that morning on the river were cheerfully exchanging insults with a cluster of young bound boys who had stopped to enjoy the spectacle. The two culprits holding their own in an unchastened manner that delighted the onlookers. In spite of their ready answers, the sport had been one-sided, as Kit could see the daubs of mud that stained the rope boards of the stock. Even as she watched, an apple core sailed through the air and bounced off Nat's forehead. A cheer went up at such marksmanship, but Nat's comment drew an even louder roar of approval. Watch your tongue, you scoundrel, shouted a farmer catching sight of Kit's flustered face. There's a lady present. Nat twisted his head an inch or so that the boards allowed him and stared at her without the slightest recognition. Her presence had spoiled the sport. The servant boys drifted away, and presently the three prisoners sat for a moment neglected. Impelled by some urge, half pity and half annoyance, Kit came forward from the shelter of the trees. Nat watched her come without a flicker in his blue eyes. Now that she stood directly in front of him, she could see the bruise that the careless missile had left. Suddenly she felt the tears rising. "Kit, for heaven's sake," Nat hissed in an exasperated whisper. "Get away from this place, quick!" Deliberately, Kit stepped closer. She marked the way the tight boards were chafing the hard, brown wrists. "This is horrible, Nat," she burst out. "I can't bear to see you in this hateful thing." "I'm quite comfortable, thank you," he assured her. "Don't waste your pity on me. 'Tis a roomy as many a ship's berth I've slept in." "Isn't there anything I can do? Are you hungry?" "You can stop trying to be a lady of mercy. 'Twas well worth it. I'd gladly sit here another 5 hours for a sight of Sir William's face that evening. He was impossible." With a flounce of petticoats, she turned away. It did not help to notice that her foolish concern had been witnessed by a whole group of early lecture-goers. This would certainly give them something to wag their tongues over. Head held, head held high, she forced herself to keep a ladylike pace. At the door of the meeting-house she stopped to read the posted notice, that for stealing pumpkins from a field and for kindling a fire in a dwelling, they three shall be seated in the stocks from 1 hour before the lecture till 1 hour after. They shall pay a fine of 40 shillings each, and they will be forbidden hereafter on certainty of 30 lashes at the whipping post, to enter the boundaries of the township of Wethersfield. Kit's courage failed her altogether. She simply could not go into the meeting-house. She could not bear to sit there and hear the sentence read aloud. She could not face the family, or the whispering and staring that would turn her own family pew into a pillory. Gathering her skirts about her, she hurried across the green, skirted the square in wide arc, and fled home to her uncle's house. It was the first time since they had come to Wethersfield in the spring that she had dared to miss a Thursday lecture. The family had already left for the meeting-house, and Mercy, busy at her spinning, did not hear her return. Kit crept up the stairs, but the empty bedchamber was not the refuge she needed. She had to talk to someone. Mercy would listen with gentleness, of course, but how could she explain to Mercy about Nat? There was only one person who could understand. Is it a good chance to talk to Hannah? Is it a good chance to take Hannah the piece of cloth anyway? It is a good chance to take Hannah the piece of cloth anyway, Kit reasoned. At least this one afternoon I can be very sure of not meeting any seafaring friends there. She stole down the stairs again and took a winding path through the back meadows to Blackbird Pond. "Don't fret, child," Hannah said philosophically, when Kit had poured out the story. "The stocks aren't so dreadful. I've been in them myself. When Nat is banished from Wethersfield, he won't be able to leave the ship or to come to see you any more." "Well, now, that is a shame," agreed Hannah, unperturbed. In spite of her woe, Kit had to smile. Why hadn't she remembered that ever since he was 8 years old, Nat had been finding his way to the Blackbird Pond through devious meadow routes? Hannah knew that no threat could keep Nat from coming again. As always, here in this house, things seemed to look much less desperate. "This William Ashby," Hannah said thoughtfully. "I never heard Nat mention him. He had come to call the night that Nat walked home with me. Nat met him there." "Does thee mean he had come to call on thee?" "Yes." Why hadn't she ever told Hannah about William? "Is it that young man courting thee, Kit?" Kit looked down at her hands. "I guess you'd call it that, Hannah." Hannah's shrewd little eyes studied the girl's downcast face. "Does thee plan to marry him?" she asked gently. I don't know. They all expect me to." "Does thee love him?" "How could I tell, Hannah? He is good, and he is fond of me. Besides," Kit's voice was pleading, "if I don't marry him, how shall I ever escape from my uncle's house?" "Bless thee, child," said Hannah softly.